A thin gray light spreads across the highlands of northern Ethiopia, catching on stone ridges and dry grasses as tens of thousands of feet press into the earth. Spears and rifles shift in the cold air. Campfires die down. Somewhere in the distance, an Italian bugle sounds, sharp, confident, certain that the morning will end the way empire says it always does. No one here believes that. Not the farmers who walked for weeks to reach this place. Not the nobles mounted on tired horses. Not the woman standing near the center of the camp, watching the horizon with a strategist's calm, already measuring how arrogance will break against terrain. This moment did not begin on this battlefield. It began quietly, years earlier, on paper. In the late 19th century, Europe is dividing Africa with rulers and ink. The maps are clean, the lines are straight. On the ground, nothing is either. Italy, late to the imperial race and desperate for status, looks south across the Red Sea toward the Horn of Africa. Eritrea is already taken. Ethiopia, ancient, independent, diplomatically savvy, stands in the way. For Rome, this is unfinished business. For Ethiopia, it is survival dressed in ceremony and language. In 1889, two versions of a single treaty are signed in the town of Wuchale. One is written in Italian, the other in Amharic. They look similar. They are not. The Italian version claims Ethiopia has agreed to conduct all foreign relations through Rome, turning a sovereign empire into a protectorate without saying the word out loud. The Amharic version says something else entirely, that Ethiopia may use Italy as an intermediary if it chooses. May, not must. Optional, not binding. Menelik II understands treaties. He understands Europe. He has spent years balancing rifles against diplomacy, playing empires against one another to modernize his state without surrendering it. When Italy announces to Europe that Ethiopia now belongs to them, Menelik does not shout. He does not rush. He gathers evidence. He sends letters. He points to the Amharic text. Italy refuses to retreat. This is where history tightens. By the mid-1890s, Italy has invested too much pride to step back. Newspapers speak of destiny. Politicians promise quick victory. Generals assure Rome that Ethiopian forces are backward, disorganized, incapable of standing against modern European arms. Supplies move inland. Columns form. Maps are drawn with optimism instead of accuracy. Ethiopia responds differently. Not with declarations, but with preparation. Messengers ride across the highlands calling regional leaders to arms. Men arrive carrying rifles purchased from France and Russia. Weapons traded carefully over years precisely for a moment like this. They bring grain. They bring animals. They bring local knowledge, where water disappears, where valleys funnel men into traps, where hills become walls. This is not chaos. It is mobilization. At the center of it stands Menelik II, not as a romantic warrior king, but as an administrator of scale. He understands that modern war is logistics as much as courage. He knows how many mouths must be fed, how far men can march before exhaustion turns into collapse. And beside him stands Empress Teitu Betul, whose political instincts are sharper than most generals on either side of the coming battle. She has warned against trusting Italian intentions from the beginning. She knows what empire sounds like when it smiles. As Italian forces push deeper inland, confidence follows them like a shadow. General Oreste Baratieri hesitates. He sees the risk, but Rome demands movement. Delay looks like weakness. The assumption remains unchanged. Ethiopia will fracture under pressure. It always has elsewhere. It always will. What Italy does not understand is that Ethiopia is not reacting. It is setting terms. By early 1896, both sides are moving toward the mountains near Adwa. Italy believes it is advancing into a decisive confrontation on its schedule. Ethiopia knows exactly where it wants this to happen. The terrain is steep, broken, and deceptive, perfect for numbers, for coordination, for local knowledge that cannot be learned from European maps. This is not a clash of civilizations. It is a collision between assumption and reality. If you stay with this story to its end, you won't just see how an empire lost a battle. You'll understand how confidence built on misunderstanding collapses faster than any army under fire, and why this morning in the Ethiopian highlands will echo far beyond these hills, long after the smoke clears. As night falls before the confrontation, Ethiopian camps are quiet but alert. Songs move through the darkness, prayers, reminders of lineage, memory turned into resolve. Italian camps prepare differently. Orders are given. Columns are planned to move separately at dawn, relying on timing and coordination that assumes the enemy will behave predictably. They will not. The ground beneath Adwa has been studied by the people who live on it. The distances between ridges are known by heart. The paths that vanish under moonlight are familiar. While Italian officers trust their charts, Ethiopian commanders trust their land. By the time the first shots will be fired, the outcome will already be leaning, subtly, invisibly, toward something Europe believes impossible. The sun has not risen yet, but the empire is already off balance. The Ethiopian highlands do not awaken all at once. Light creeps slowly across slopes and valleys, revealing movement where there once seemed only stone. Columns form without bugles. Commands travel by voice and gesture, passed along by men who already know where they are meant to be. This is not an army assembled overnight. It is the visible surface of a system that has been building itself quietly for decades. To outsiders, Ethiopia is often described as feudal, fragmented, barely held together by tradition. That assumption is comfortable and disastrously wrong. What stands here is a centralized empire capable of mobilizing at a scale few European observers bothered to imagine. Authority flows outward from the imperial court, but loyalty flows inward from regional leaders who understand that this war is not about territory alone. It is about whether sovereignty can survive in an age that insists it cannot. Menelik's power is not rooted only in lineage. It is built on negotiation, marriage alliances, and a careful balance between regional autonomy and imperial command. He allows local rulers to retain prestige and authority, but when the call comes, they answer. Not because they are coerced, but because they understand the stakes. If Ethiopia falls, no region remains untouched. The mobilization itself is staggering. Tens of thousands arrive from Shewa, Tigray, Gojam, Wollo. Some carry modern rifles, French Gras, Russian Berdans, acquired through years of patient diplomacy. Others carry spears, shields, older firearms. This is not weakness. It is redundancy. It is depth. Modern weapons are concentrated where they matter most, supported by numbers and mobility that no European expeditionary force can match. And there is something else Italy never fully accounts for: legitimacy. This is not a conscript army dragged into battle by decree. These men believe in the authority they are defending. The empire they fight for is not an abstract claim on a map. It is a living system that has taxed them, protected them, negotiated on their behalf, and preserved their autonomy in a world rapidly losing patience with independence. When they march, they do so with purpose sharpened by memory. Empress Taitu understands this better than anyone. While Italian commanders debate supply routes and marching orders, she focuses on morale, symbolism, and cohesion. She ensures water sources near Adwa are secured, denying them to the advancing enemy. She encourages resistance not only as strategy, but as identity. Her presence alone reframes the war. This is not a defensive scramble. It is a national stand. Preparation extends beyond numbers. Ethiopian commanders study Italian behavior closely. They know how European armies move, how they rely on fixed supply lines, how confidence becomes rigidity. They anticipate division, not unity. When Italian columns begin advancing separately, Ethiopia does not rush to meet them head-on. It waits, it watches, it lets distance stretch coordination thin. Patience becomes a weapon. In camp, nights are cold and quiet. Food is rationed carefully. Grain moves where it is needed. Messages flow constantly between commanders, adjusting positions with a flexibility the Italian army lacks. There is no single rigid plan, only intention, shaped by terrain and opportunity. The highlands favor those who know how to disappear and reappear at will. Italy believes it is facing a mass. What it is actually facing is a system. By the final days before battle, Ethiopian forces are not merely assembled, they are aligned. The terrain around Adwa is not random ground chosen by chance. It is a place where narrow passes limit artillery, where ridges break formations, where knowledge outweighs range. Every hill matters. Every ravine has been considered. When Italian scouts report Ethiopian numbers, their estimates are dismissed as exaggeration. The belief in European superiority is too deeply rooted to be shaken by inconvenient facts. The logic of empire insists that discipline and technology must always prevail over numbers and resolve. Ethiopia has built its strategy on the opposite assumption. As dawn approaches, there is no sense of panic in the Ethiopian camp. Only focus. The understanding that this is not a rebellion or a skirmish. It is a test. Not of courage, but of whether preparation, unity, and patience can overturn the assumptions of an entire imperial system. The men take their positions. Commanders make final adjustments. Signals are prepared. The landscape itself seems to hold its breath. Across the hills, Italian columns begin to move, separate, confident, committed to a plan that depends on an enemy who will not behave as expected. Ethiopia does not need to chase them. It only needs to let them advance. The Italian advance begins before sunrise, shaped by confidence more than clarity. Orders are issued in measured tones, columns stepping forward on schedules that look precise on paper and fragile in reality. The plan depends on separation without isolation, movement without confusion, speed without exhaustion. It assumes the enemy will react slowly, predictably, and in fragments. None of that is true. General Oreste Baratieri knows the terrain is hostile. He has warned Rome that Ethiopian forces are larger and better armed than expected. He has hesitated, delayed, recalculated. But hesitation reads as weakness in the capital, and weakness has no place in imperial ambition. Pressure arrives not from the battlefield, but from politics. Advance, he is told. Finish it. So he advances. 4 Italian brigades move separately through the broken hills near Adwa, each assigned a route meant to converge at dawn. The distances are underestimated. The paths are poorly marked. Communication between columns is limited, dependent on runners and assumptions. Artillery struggles uphill. Soldiers march carrying days of supplies through thin air and unforgiving stone. The further they move, the more the plan depends on timing they cannot verify. What Italian command believes is coordination is, in reality, isolation. Maps used by the officers are drawn from incomplete surveys, stripped of the lived knowledge embedded in the land. Valleys appear gentle on paper and reveal themselves as traps. Ridges hide entire formations from view. When units drift off course, they do not know it. When they slow, no one sees them fall behind. Ethiopian commanders see everything. From the high ground, movement below is unmistakable. Dust trails mark progress. The separation between columns becomes visible, then pronounced. Ethiopian forces adjust quietly, flowing into positions that block retreat, seal passes, and close distances. No signal announces the shift. It happens naturally, like water finding the lowest point. Italy has underestimated more than numbers. It has misunderstood intention. This is not an enemy trying to survive contact. It is an enemy shaping it. As the sun rises, Italian confidence begins to fray. Units expecting to link up find empty ground instead. Artillery fire echoes without clear targets. Officers send messengers who never return, swallowed by terrain and opposing forces moving faster than anticipated. The further forward the columns press, the less control they retain. Still, the belief persists that modern discipline will prevail. That training will compensate for uncertainty. That technology will bridge the gaps. But modern war does not forgive flawed assumptions. By mid-morning, the illusion of cohesion collapses. One brigade stumbles directly into concentrated Ethiopian forces positioned on higher ground. Fire comes not in scattered bursts, but in sustained volleys. The response is immediate, coordinated, overwhelming. Italian formations buckle under pressure they did not expect to face alone. Elsewhere, another column advances too far, opening its flank without realizing it. Ethiopian units move around them, not charging recklessly, but closing patiently, tightening space until movement itself becomes impossible. Supply lines vanish, retreat routes disappear. Orders arrive too late to matter. What Italy thought would be a demonstration of imperial efficiency becomes a lesson in exposure. General Vittorio da Bormida pushes his brigade forward, believing aggression will restore momentum. Instead, he drives deeper into isolation. Surrounded by forces he never believed could assemble so quickly, his men fight bravely, but bravery cannot replace position. When the encirclement closes, there is no relief coming, no coordinated withdrawal, only realization. By the time Italian command understands the scale of the problem, control has already slipped away. The battlefield is no longer something they are shaping. It is something acting upon them. Sound travels strangely in the mountains. Gunfire echoes from multiple directions. Reports contradict each other. The clarity promised by planning dissolves into fragments of noise and urgency. Ethiopian forces maintain cohesion not through rigid command, but through shared purpose and adaptability. Units support each other instinctively, reinforcing success and withdrawing where needed without waiting for permission. The land guides them. The moment belongs to them. This is the turning point, not because a single charge breaks the Italian line, but because the entire logic of the invasion collapses under its own assumptions. The idea that this war could be controlled, contained, and concluded quickly dies here, among ridges that refuse to obey European expectations. By early afternoon, the outcome is no longer uncertain. Italian resistance continues in pockets, fierce and disciplined, but disconnected. Ammunition runs low. Water is gone. Casualties mount. Officers fall. Command dissolves into survival. Ethiopia has not merely resisted invasion, it has dismantled it, methodically, decisively, and on its own terms. The battle does not announce itself with a single, defining moment. It unfolds in waves, pressure building, lines bending, certainty eroding. By late morning on March 1st, the mountains around Adwa are no longer terrain. They are participants. Italian brigades are now fully exposed. What was meant to be a coordinated advance has fractured into isolated fights, each one unfolding without awareness of the others. The landscape that seemed empty at dawn reveals itself as crowded, alive with movement. Ethiopian forces descend from higher ground in disciplined surges, not reckless charges. They strike where momentum already favors them, where Italian formations are stretched thin and options have narrowed to seconds. Fire pours down from ridges. The sound is continuous, overlapping, impossible to localize. For Italian soldiers trained to face linear fronts, the experience is disorienting. There is no clear direction of attack, no visible center to break. Pressure comes from above, from the flanks, from positions they did not know existed. Officers shout commands that cannot travel far enough to matter. At the heart of the Ethiopian advance is coordination born not from rigid hierarchy, but from shared understanding. Commanders read the terrain and each other. When one section gains ground, another reinforces it instinctively. When resistance stiffens, forces shift rather than stall. This is not chaos, it is elasticity. General Dabormida's brigade, already overextended, finds itself surrounded. His men form defensive positions, fighting with determination that later earns respect even from their opponents. But resolve cannot overcome geometry. Ethiopian units close in steadily, cutting off escape routes, sealing gaps, forcing engagement at distances that neutralize Italian artillery advantages. The encirclement is not rushed. It is completed. Elsewhere, Italian attempts to regroup fail under constant pressure. Units that might have withdrawn in order instead press forward into worse positions, convinced relief must be close. It is not. Communication has collapsed. Signals go unanswered. The battlefield has outgrown command. For Ethiopian forces, this is not vengeance. It is execution of strategy. The objective is not annihilation for its own sake, but decisive defeat, clear enough that no ambiguity survives. The fighting is fierce, personal, exhausting. The cost is real on both sides, but the direction of the battle is no longer in doubt. By early afternoon, Italian resistance begins to fragment entirely. Ammunition dwindles. Water is gone. Wounded men cannot be evacuated. Officers fall, trying to rally formations that no longer exist as units. The imperial narrative, that technology and discipline guarantee victory, disintegrates under the weight of reality. Across the field, Ethiopian forces press their advantage with control rather than frenzy. They know what this moment represents. This is not just a battlefield victory, it is proof. When the fighting finally ebbs, the scale of the defeat becomes clear. Italian losses are catastrophic. Entire brigades have ceased to function. Commanders are dead or captured. The invasion force, so carefully assembled, is broken beyond recovery. Ethiopia stands victorious, not through surprise or luck, but through preparation, unity, and an understanding of war that empire refused to acknowledge. By sunset, the mountains are quiet again. Smoke thins. Survivors gather the wounded. Messages are sent, not of panic, but of confirmation. The impossible has happened, and it has happened decisively. A European empire has been defeated in open battle by an African state, on African terms, in full view of the world. Nothing about the age of empire will look the same after this day. The news travels faster than armies ever could. Across the Red Sea, across Europe, across the colonial world, reports arrive that do not fit the script. At first, they are dismissed as exaggeration, then confirmed, then repeated with growing disbelief. An Italian expeditionary force has been destroyed, not stalled, not repelled, defeated outright. In Rome, the political consequences are immediate. The government collapses under the weight of humiliation. Newspapers that once promised glory now struggle to explain loss. The myth of effortless expansion fractures, replaced by uncomfortable questions about competence, assumption, and cost. Italy signs the Treaty of Addis Ababa, formally recognizing Ethiopia as a sovereign, independent state. The claim born in the mistranslation at Wuchale is erased in ink that cannot be misread. For Ethiopia, the victory is more than survival. It is affirmation. Menelik II emerges not as a regional ruler who resisted invasion, but as a statesman who outmaneuvered an empire using its own rules. He strengthens diplomatic ties, secures borders, and ensures that Ethiopia's independence is not merely symbolic, but internationally acknowledged. The empire remains African, sovereign, and modern on its own terms. Empress Taitu's role, long minimized in imperial accounts, endures in Ethiopian memory as central. Her insistence on resistance, her understanding of terrain and morale, her refusal to accept European inevitability, all become part of the victory's architecture. Adwa is not remembered as an accident. It is remembered as intention fulfilled. Beyond Ethiopia, the shockwaves deepen. In Africa and across the diaspora, Adwa becomes evidence, undeniable, documented, that empire is not destiny. That modern warfare is not the exclusive domain of Europe. Intellectuals, activists, and future leaders study the battle not as legend, but as precedent. A state confronted imperialism and won, without myth, without miracle. European colonial strategy quietly adjusts. Confidence gives way to caution. The assumption that technology alone guarantees control begins to erode. Adwa does not end empire, but it exposes its vulnerability. Years later, attempts will be made to rewrite the story, to minimize the defeat, to frame it as anomaly, but the record resists distortion. Photographs, reports, treaties, graves, they all point to the same conclusion. The age of empire met a boundary it could not cross. On the battlefield itself, the land remains. Hills, ridges, paths worn by time. There are no grand monuments rising from the earth, only memory, carried forward through generations. Each year, the victory is remembered not as triumph over an enemy, but as proof of self-determination. Adwa endures because it forces history to confront its assumptions. It reminds the world that power misread becomes weakness, and that preparation, unity, and resolve can overturn even the most entrenched narratives. An empire arrived certain of its future.
It left behind a lesson it never intended to teach.